The city gym throbbed with a low, steady hum of anticipation. It wasn't a fancy gym, more like a big, boxy room with padded floors and a few punching bags hanging from the ceiling. But today, it was transformed. Colorful banners with pictures of strong people doing cool kicks hung on the walls. Kids ran around, pretending to be ninjas, while their parents chatted, sipping sugary drinks. The air smelled like sweat and determination, with a hint of popcorn from the snack bar in the corner. This was the day of the regional martial arts exhibition. Fighters from all over the area had come to show off their skills and maybe, just maybe, get a chance to spar with the champion. He was a big guy, all muscles and tattoos, with a serious face that didn't crack a smile. He sat on a folding chair near the ring, scrolling through his phone, seemingly uninterested in the commotion around him. A long table had been set up near the entrance, where fighters could sign up to challenge the champ in friendly bouts. A line of eager competitors stretched across the gym, each one dreaming of landing a lucky punch or a well-timed kick. There was Marcos, the karate kid with the bright white GI, practicing his stances. And Brenda, the kickboxing queen with the colorful braids, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Even old Mr. Henderson, the judo master with the graying beard, had signed up, hoping to show these young whippersnappers a thing or two. The energy in the room was high, like a balloon about to burst. Everyone was ready for a good show. The line shuffled forward, a mix of nervous energy and bravado. Marcos bounced, throwing air punches. Brenda stretched her legs, her bright braids swinging. Even Mr. Henderson straightened his back a little taller. The champion remained glued to his phone, a wall of indifference in the midst of the excitement. Then, a different kind of figure approached the sign-up table. She wasn't wearing a fancy GI or colorful workout clothes. Instead, she wore a faded gray hoodie that looked several sizes too big, and a pair of worn sneakers with the laces untied. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was hidden in the shadow of the hood. She looked ordinary, out of place, even. As she stepped forward, one of the organizers, a man with a booming voice and a clipboard in his hand, stopped her. He raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hold on there, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is for trained athletes. You know, people who actually know how to fight. Are you lost?" A few spectators nearby chuckled, their eyes scanning her up and down with amusement. Marcos stopped bouncing. Brenda paused her stretching. Even Mr. Henderson peered over his glasses with curiosity. The champion, however, remained oblivious, his thumbs still flying across the screen of his phone. The woman didn't say a word. She simply looked at the organizer, her expression unreadable. There was something in her eyes, though, a quiet intensity that hinted at something more than met the eye. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, which she flattened on the table. It was a waiver form. The organizer hesitated. He glanced at the waiver, then back at the woman. Her eyes, though still shadowed by the hood, held a steady gaze that didn't waver. He clearly didn't want to let her sign up, but something in her demeanor gave him pause. Maybe it was the quiet confidence, or perhaps the nagging feeling that he was underestimating her. He sighed, a puff of air that ruffled his mustache. "Fine," he grumbled, handing her a pen. "Sign here, an initial at the bottom. But don't come crying to me when you get hurt." The woman took the pen and, without a word, filled out the form with neat, precise strokes. She handed it back to the organizer, who barely glanced at it before tossing it onto a stack of other waivers. He called out the next name on the list, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. But the woman didn't leave. She stood her ground, her gaze fixed on the ring where the champion was still engrossed in his phone. A ripple of whispers spread through the gym. Did she actually sign up? Who let her in? She's going to get creamed. Marcos shook his head, muttering something about needing to be serious. Brenda rolled her eyes, resuming her stretching. Mr. Henderson, however, watched the woman with a thoughtful expression, his gaze lingering on the way she held herself, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the slight bend in her knees. He'd seen that stance before, in fighters who knew what they were doing. Finally, the organizer announced her name. Or rather, the name she had written on the waiver. It was a simple name, almost unremarkable. Sarah. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah. The woman in the hoodie. Was she really going to challenge the champion? The organizer, clipboard in hand, gestured impatiently towards the ring. Sarah? You're up. Sarah moved with a surprising grace, shedding the oversized hoodie as she walked. Underneath, she wore a simple black t-shirt and athletic pants. Her movements were economical, each step deliberate. She didn't acknowledge the stares or the murmurs. Her focus was entirely on the ring, on the champion, who finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of mild interest crossing his face. As she stepped onto the mat, the whispers intensified. It was like a scene from a movie, the underdog facing impossible odds. Marcos and Brenda exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and morbid curiosity in their eyes. Even Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. The referee, a portly man with a whistle around his neck, gave them a quick rundown of the rules. Sarah nodded silently, her gaze unwavering. The champion, a smirk playing on his lips, cracked his knuckles, seemingly eager to make quick work of this unexpected challenger. "Ready?" the referee asked. The champion nodded confidently. Sarah simply tightened her stance, her eyes locked on her opponent. "Fight." The bell rang, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the tension. The champion lunged forward, a blur of motion and muscle. He clearly intended to end the match quickly, to prove that this was no place for amateurs. But then, something unexpected happened. Sarah moved. Not in a frantic, flailing way, but with a smooth, almost effortless grace. It was like watching water flow around a rock. She sidestepped his initial attack, her movements precise and economical. Then, she struck. It wasn't a punch, or a kick, or any of the flashy moves the crowd expected. It was a takedown. A swift, fluid motion that seemed to defy gravity. One moment, the champion was lunging forward, full of confidence. The next, Sarah had used his own momentum against him, sweeping his legs out from under him with effortless precision. He crashed to the mat with a thud, the air knocked out of his lungs. The gym went silent. It was as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire world. The only sound was the champion's ragged breathing as he lay sprawled on the padded floor, stunned and disoriented. Sarah stood over him, her expression calm and composed. She hadn't even broken a sweat. Her movements were so clean, so efficient, that it looked like she had rehearsed the takedown 1,000 times. It was a display of skill that transcended mere strength or aggression. It was artistry in motion. Marcos's jaw dropped. Brenda's eyes widened. Even Mr. Henderson, who had seen countless fights in his day, let out a soft, impressed whistle. The champion, still struggling to catch his breath, pushed himself up onto his elbows, his face a mask of disbelief. He had been completely outmaneuvered, defeated by someone he had dismissed as an amateur. The silence in the gym stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the champion's gasps. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't taunt. She didn't even smile. Instead, she took a step back, away from the fallen champion. Then, with a graceful bow, she turned and walked towards the edge of the mat. The silence continued to hang in the air, thick and heavy. It was a silence born of shock, of disbelief, of a sudden and profound shift in expectations. The crowd had come to see a spectacle, a display of brute force and athletic prowess. They had expected the champion to dominate, to crush any challenger who dared to step into the ring with him. But Sarah had shattered that expectation. She had shown them something different, something more. She had demonstrated the power of skill, the beauty of precision, the quiet strength that comes from years of dedication and discipline. And then, just as suddenly as it had fallen, the silence broke. A single clap echoed through the gym, tentative at first, then growing louder and more confident. It was Mr. Henderson, his face etched with admiration, leading the charge. Soon, the entire gym erupted in applause. The sound was deafening, a wave of appreciation washing over Sarah as she reached the edge of the mat. She paused for a moment, her back still to the crowd. Then, without a word, she stepped off the mat and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a gym buzzing with excitement and a champion still trying to piece together what had just happened. The applause continued, but Sarah was gone, swallowed by the throng of spectators. The organizer, still clutching his clipboard, looked around in bewilderment. Marcos and Brenda were now whispering excitedly, replaying the takedown in their minds, trying to understand how she had done it. The champion, finally managing to sit up, stared blankly at the empty space where Sarah had stood just moments before. Then, a voice cut through the noise. "That's her. That's Sarah Chun." It was Mr. Henderson, his voice raspy but clear, pointing towards the crowd. "I knew I recognized that form. That's Sarah Chun. She used to be a national champion. Years ago, disappeared right off the map." A collective gasp swept through the gym. Sarah Chun. The name was familiar, a legend whispered among martial arts circles. She had been a prodigy, a rising star, destined for greatness. But then she had vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and disappointed fans. Sarah Chin, the organizer, stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief. But she's wearing sneakers and a hoodie. Doesn't matter what she's wearing, Mr. Henderson said, shaking his head. That's her. I'd recognize that technique anywhere. She was the best grappler I've ever seen. The news spread like wildfire. Sarah Chin was back. The quiet woman in the hoodie was a former champion. The crowd surged forward, eager to catch another glimpse of the legend, to understand why she had disappeared and why she had returned. The energy in the gym shifted again, from surprise to awe, from disbelief to respect. Sarah's silence had spoken volumes, and now her past was doing the talking. The crowd surged, a sea of faces all searching for the same person. Sarah Chin, they chanted, their voices filled with a mixture of excitement and regret. Regret for having dismissed her, for having laughed at her, for not recognizing the legend in their midst. The organizer, now thoroughly flustered, pushed his way through the crowd, desperate to find her. He wanted to apologize, to offer her anything, to somehow make amends for his earlier arrogance. But Sarah was nowhere to be found. Marcos and Brenda, no longer whispering, joined the search, their initial skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. They understood now that true strength wasn't about flashy moves or expensive gear. It was about skill, discipline, and humility. Sarah Chin had embodied all of those qualities. Mr. Henderson, leaning on his cane, watched the scene with a knowing smile. He had seen this before, the way people were drawn to greatness, the way they were humbled by true talent. He knew that Sarah hadn't come back for fame or recognition. She had come for something else, something deeper. Meanwhile, the champion, still sitting on the mat, slowly began to rise to his feet. He was bruised, both physically and emotionally. But as he looked around at the commotion, at the sea of faces searching for Sarah Chin, a new emotion began to dawn on his face: respect. He had been defeated, yes, but he had also learned a valuable lesson. He had underestimated his opponent, and he had paid the price. And now, he wanted to understand what had made her so great. He wanted to learn from her. He wanted to be better. The organizer finally spotted her, standing near the exit, still wearing her worn sneakers and simple black t-shirt. He hurried towards her, his face flushed with embarrassment. Sarah, Miss Chin, please, wait, he called out, his voice cracking slightly. I owe you an apology. I had no idea who you were. Your performance was incredible. Sarah turned to face him, her expression calm and unreadable. It's all right, she said, her voice soft but firm. I wasn't here for your approval. But why did you come back? The organizer asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Why now, after all these years? Sarah hesitated for a moment, her gaze sweeping across the gym, taking in the faces of the eager spectators, the humbled champion, and the knowing smile of Mr. Henderson. I came back to remind myself, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. To remind myself why I started, and what really matters. She paused, then looked directly at the organizer, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. It's not about the fame, or the trophies, or the recognition. It's about the discipline, the dedication, and the pursuit of excellence. It's about pushing yourself beyond your limits and never giving up on your dreams. With that, she turned and walked out of the gym, leaving the organizer speechless and the crowd buzzing with newfound inspiration. Her words hung in the air, a powerful reminder of the true spirit of martial arts. The champion, having finally reached the edge of the mat, watched her go, a glimmer of understanding dawning in his eyes. He knew that he had a long way to go, but he was ready to start the journey. He was ready to learn, to grow, and to become a better fighter and a better person. The referee approached the champion. Are you able to continue? The referee asked. No, the champion said. But I need to talk to her, the champion said about Sarah. The referee looked surprised. Are you sure? You could still take some time to recover. The champion shook his head, his gaze fixed on the now empty doorway through which Sarah had disappeared. No, he said, his voice firm. I need to talk to her. It's more important than the exhibition. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain in his body. The crowd parted respectfully, allowing him to pass. He walked towards the exit, his eyes scanning the faces of the people outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sarah. He spotted her standing near a bus stop, her back to him. He took a deep breath and approached her cautiously, unsure of what to say. Sarah, he said, his voice hesitant. Sarah turned around, her expression calm and composed. Yes, I. I wanted to thank you, the champion said, his voice filled with sincerity, for showing me what real martial arts is all about. Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting his. You're welcome. I also wanted to ask you something, the champion continued, his voice growing stronger. Would you be willing to teach me? To train me? I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm willing to put in the work. Sarah considered his request for a moment, her gaze searching his face for any sign of insincerity. She saw none. She saw only humility, respect, and a genuine desire to improve. A faint smile touched her lips. All right, she said. I'll train you. But it won't be easy. The champion grinned, his face lighting up with excitement. I wouldn't expect it to be. And so, an unlikely partnership was formed, born out of defeat, respect, and a shared love of martial arts. The champion had lost a battle, but he had gained something far more valuable, a teacher, a mentor, and a new path to follow. The crowd cheered and clapped when they saw them talking. A selfie was taken. The end. The referee looked down at the champion, who was still on the mat, trying to catch his breath. Before the referee could say anything, Sarah walked back onto the mat. The crowd gasped. She extended her hand to the champion. It wasn't a gesture of pity or of gloating. It was a gesture of respect. It was an offer of help, a reminder that true strength wasn't about winning or losing, but about sportsmanship and humility. The champion looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. He reached out and took her hand, and Sarah gently helped him to his feet. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers even louder than before. They understood now what Sarah was trying to teach them. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about character. Thank you, the champion said, his voice hoarse. Sarah nodded, her expression calm and composed. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any words could have. She turned and walked towards the exit, leaving the champion standing tall, his head held high. He had lost the match, but he had gained something far more valuable, a lesson in humility, a demonstration of true sportsmanship, and a newfound respect for his opponent. The organizer approached the champion, his face filled with admiration. That was incredible, he said. You both showed amazing character. The champion smiled. I have a lot to learn, he said, but I'm ready to start. He walked off the mat, his steps filled with purpose. He knew that his journey was just beginning, and he was excited to see where it would lead. The crowd was inspired. The end. Sarah's final departure from the gym was quiet, yet powerful. She didn't need to say anything more. Her actions, her skill, her humility, they all spoke volumes. The image of her, the unassuming woman in the worn sneakers, offering a hand to the champion, would be etched in the minds of everyone present for a long time to come. The crowd began to disperse, but the energy in the gym had shifted. It wasn't just about competition anymore. It was about respect, about discipline, about the pursuit of excellence. Sarah Chun had reminded them all of the true spirit of martial arts. Marcos and Brenda, now friends, started practicing the takedowns Sarah had used, helping each other with the technique. They understood that true strength came from hard work and dedication, not from arrogance or ego. Mr. Henderson smiled knowingly, pleased to see that Sarah's message had been received. He knew that she had inspired a new generation of martial artists, and that her legacy would continue to live on. The organizer, still slightly flustered, began taking down the banners and packing away the equipment. He had learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate anyone, and always respect the power of humility. The champion, now walking with a newfound confidence, began his journey to become a better fighter and a better person. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face the challenge. He had a lot to learn from Sarah, and he was eager to begin his training. As the sun set, the city gym slowly returned to its normal state. But the events of that day would never be forgotten. Sarah Chin had come and gone, leaving behind a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed her remarkable display of skill, humility, and sportsmanship. She was a legend, and her story would continue to inspire generations of martial artists to come. The end.